Good morning. I'd like to call the Government Operations Subcommittee hearing to order. Pleased to welcome everyone to the Government Oversight and Reform Subcommittee hearing this morning. And the title of today's hearing is Federal Real Property, Eliminating Waste and Mismanagement of Real Property Assets. I want to again welcome my ranking member. Sorry, I got a little bit late start here this morning. Mr. Conley and subcommittee members, Mr. Meadows, and others who may be joining us. Thank you, too, for our witnesses who I'll introduce shortly for participating. The order of business this morning is we'll start with opening statements by members of our panel. And without objection, the record will be left open for other members to submit their statements. We will then proceed to hear from each of our witnesses. Normally we provide about 5 minutes. This isn't a particularly big panel, but we ask that the members of the panel please participate by trying to summarize in about 5 minutes. You can ask through the chair any requests for additional information or data to be made part of the record, and it will be made part of the record. And we'll swear you in at the appropriate time when we recognize you. So with that, I'll begin the proceedings. And again, thank you for attending and participating. This is a pretty important hearing. Sometimes it doesn't get the attention of some of the other major investigative hearings that we do, particularly in OGR, Government Reform and Oversight. But it's important because the federal government is the trustee and steward of billions, literally trillions of dollars in federal property. Years ago, I did a report entitled The Federal Government Must Stop Sitting on Its Assets. And that's one report. We will reference that too in this record. That we tried not to just do the report, look at federal assets that are sitting out there idle, but also do something about the report and its findings. And it found that there were 14,000 properties either vacant or underutilized that the federal government has jurisdiction over just in the purview of GSA. This committee has, that report was done when I chaired the Transportation Committee. This committee and the subcommittee has much wider jurisdiction. Today we'll hear from VA, from OMB, and other agencies about what they've been doing to deal with this problem and how we can do an even better job across the entire spectrum of the federal government in addressing this problem of assets sitting idle. I might also preface this with this week we had a very good week with one of the major assets that was featured on page 9 of that report, and that was the conversion of the old post office, the D.C. post office, which was built in the late 1800s. It has 400,000 square feet. Half of it has remained empty of the 400,000 square feet. A new annex that was built some years ago has been vacant for 15 years. We turned that around after 2 hearings that we conducted. The first one as chair of the Transportation Committee, actually in the vacant space, the annex. Donald Trump this week and others broke ground. They won open competition to renovate that hotel. 1,000 people will work, some in construction. There'll be a 350-room hotel. The irony of it is the empty room where we held the hearing was 38 degrees in the room, 32 degrees outside. But Mr. Trump told me that that will be the largest meeting and conference banquet room on the East Coast, that area where we held the hearing, which, again, a space that had been vacant for 15 years. It costing the taxpayer $6 to $8 million a year in losses, and that's converted to $250,000 a month revenue plus a percentage of some of the profit. So the taxpayer can benefit by that. So that's one success. Today, we're going to hear from OMB, and this committee has been waiting 3 years to obtain a list of underutilized and excess properties. Now, that's the Office of Management and Budget. We've requested 3 years ago that we get a list of underutilized and excess properties. The compliance has only been in the last few days, as a matter of fact. And what we found is the federal government currently holds 7,000 unneeded properties by their evaluation. And we don't believe that that evaluation is even up to date. But the inventory that is on the list is worth an estimate, again, by their calculation, of $350 billion. This would be unacceptable by any standards. Throughout my time service in Congress, I've worked to reduce the government's outrageous loss, and I guess some of it's because my background is in real estate, but when you see incredibly valuable property sitting idle, something's wrong, and the misutilization and underutilization of federal buildings has to be brought to a halt. In this Congress alone, our subcommittee has held 5 hearings related to the operation, maintenance, management, and disposal costs for underutilized and excess real property. As a result of our investigations, a large number of properties have been turned around and starting to generate income, also jobs. Just another example is the power station property behind the Ritz-Carlton Georgetown, 2.1 acres. After our hearing was put up, it was vacant for 10 years, costing $1 million to maintain on average a year. Brought in almost $20 million. The GSA Public Buildings Administrator commissioner actually stated at the opening of the Trump facility and groundbreaking. Needless to say, though, in its 2013 high-risk report, GAO found that the federal government still holds much more property than it needs. While it's no excuse, GAO also found that the lack of accurate, useful data impedes GSA's agency's ability to make informed decisions on how to manage real property assets. In order to conduct oversight to ensure that we better utilize federal property, I've worked with Chairman Issa and also Ranking Member Conley to gain access to, again, the federal database and information that OMB has had, which details underutilized and excess properties. We first requested the data in December of 2011 and continued making requests but never received any information. On May 27th, again, just weeks ago, almost 3 years after the original request, the committee was forced to subpoena OMB for the data on underutilized and excess properties. And now we finally, and I thank everybody for their cooperation, we have final compliance. Now that we have the list, you can see why they didn't want it made public. It contains some astounding data on the number of unused properties. In fact, there are 4,209 underutilized properties held by the federal government, which account for 24 million square feet, costing nearly $100 million. We think that's the lowest, so I think it's very hard to maintain and operate. Over 1,400 of these properties sit inactive or unused. There, now here, look at this. I had this blown up. There are 3,293 properties that have been declared excess. These properties account for approximately 15.3 million square feet, costing $37 million plus annually to operate. Not even half of the properties are slated for disposal. What's even more astonishing is the example of just one agency, and we have VA here today. As Congress this week struggles to find the resources and the funds to provide adequate medical care for our veterans, and we'll be addressing that this week. The VA is sitting on 258 underutilized properties. Where's that list? Look at this. This list goes on, and many of these are hospitals. Where's the... Okay, I asked for that to be brought up behind me. They didn't pay attention. Bring that up here. Just look at, this is one page here of underutilized assets. I also asked that they highlight the hospitals and others in yellow, which they didn't do. But look at this. Look at this, Jerry, Mr. Meadows. Look at this. Hospital, 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 hospital. This is just one page, and some of these are, this happens to be Iowa. You see it by state. But you could go through this report page after page of vacant medical facilities assets that the VA has as we struggle here to find resources. But again, some pretty valuable assets. In fact, the Veterans Administration, again, I'll just highlight these, has 258 excess or underutilized properties worth, they estimate $1.62 billion. I think it's well over $2 billion. This is just what we've been able to uncover from the data and information that we've gotten today. The inventory included 32 hospitals, 148 family housing facilities, multiple dormitories. We have veterans sleeping under bridges in their cars and fields, and we don't have domiciliary care, and we have these empty facilities that the VA has. It really is not appropriate by any measure. But unfortunately, some of the data that OMB has given us is not, we think it's not accurate. GAO has reported that that OMB list that is provided does not provide a complete picture of the uses and extended underutilized excess real property held by the federal government. It's certainly not up to date. And do we have the picture of the Orlando VA clinic? Yeah, this is a nursing home. I'm standing in front of a nursing home in Central Florida. And since the beginning of the year, that nursing home, 120 beds, has been vacant, and a 60-bed domiciliary unit behind that has been vacant. I wrote 2 years ago that we were building a new hospital, new facilities. We needed to plan ahead. They did not plan ahead. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is today, and I'm most grateful for this, sometimes when you hold a hearing there are consequences. The 29th of July, Congressman Micah, in response to my letter, which started actually 2 years ago, they've decided to keep that facility open and substantiate the need for it. So I'm pleased that VA has responded. I'm pleased that we've had one success in my backyard. But again, we have 280 other instances and data that is not up to date. The committee's found that many property in the database, the data that's provided is not complete. Sometimes the information is vague and repetitive. So we need to find better ways to manage our assets. We need to have better ways of OMB and the individual agencies monitoring the inventory, and not just making lists, but also disposing of that property appropriately, or putting it to use in the instance of our veterans, for the veterans, or for the taxpayer. Congress and the administration must work together to find solutions, how we can collect data better. We'll hear today if there are legislative impediments. We need better ways of managing our assets, and we've heard from others we need better means and tools to dispose of unneeded real property. So with those opening comments, I'm pleased to yield, and I thank him for his tireless efforts on this and many other issues. Sometimes we have our partisan differences. This is one the committee and Mr. Conley, I have to thank him publicly, have joined in for the benefit of our veterans and for the taxpayer to make certain we move forward on. Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for those kind remarks. And I echo what you said. Unfortunately, we have another subcommittee downstairs that's going to be eviscerating the Ex-Im Bank today.
Don't let 'em do it.
An organization that used to have bipartisan support and promotes U.S. business interests and helps us stay competitive when it comes to promoting U.S. exports, but apparently now it's crony capitalism and ideologically unacceptable. And, well, at any rate, I'm glad we're not doing that here in this committee, and you're absolutely right. I think this subject, and the credit certainly goes to you for being so persistent, Mr. Chairman. The whole question of excess federal property brings us together on a bipartisan basis, and I certainly support your efforts and appreciate your leadership in this regard, because I think it really is a government-wide challenge. It transcends this administration. It goes way back. Both parties deserve, I think, some blame and have to take responsibility for the situation we now find ourselves in. The good news is it's filled with opportunity. I also want to thank our witnesses for being here, two of whom are from Fairfax County. Mr. Sullivan is a constituent. Mr. Wise wants to be. And he lives just outside the 11th Congressional District. So I know they're going to give wise and perspicacious testimony, and we are going to be impressed because just of who they are and where they come from. For nearly a decade, the answer to the question about whether the government can keep its house in order seems to have been no. 2013 marked the 10th straight year that managing federal real property was featured on the U.S. Government Accountability Office's high-risk update. According to GAO, the federal government owns thousands of buildings it really no longer needs. In 2010 alone, maintenance of those buildings cost $1.7 billion. Of course, these are all rough estimates, since the fundamental weakness undermining the federal government's efforts to effectively manage its real property is its inability to maintain an inventory with accurate and accessible data. Our subcommittee found that one needs not travel far to find glaring examples of real property mismanagement. For example, Mr. Chairman, our April 2013 field hearing was held, as you indicated, in a vacant GSA warehouse that cost $70,000 per year to operate and maintain. It's remained unused since 2009, 5 years. I think everyone could agree. This is really an example of taxpayer waste that ought to be rectified. GAO audits have found that in certain real estate markets, the total square footage of excess federal real property would be large enough to house virtually every federal agency in that region. However, in these very same real estate markets, the vast majority of those agencies are using precious resources on leases with private landlords. This type of mismanagement and bad juxtaposition of available assets not being utilized or underutilized, I think ought to be unacceptable on a bipartisan basis. Every dollar spent on an unnecessary lease is a dollar diverted away from mission-critical function. In this current era of austerity, operational inefficiencies such as these have real-world consequences for the citizens they serve, and they represent a profound opportunity cost for the federal government. What are the causes of inefficient federal property management? GAO found that property disposal costs can outweigh the financial benefits of conveying ownership to private parties. In addition, certain legal requirements, such as preserving historical properties and conducting environmental remediation, can make the property disposal process very lengthy and unattractive. Further, while I strongly believe local governments and local taxpayers must have a voice in the disposal of excess property, it's also true that stakeholder interests may conflict with property disposal and reuse plans, making disposal and reuse difficult. As the former chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, I was proud to work with local stakeholders, developers, and the GSA to successfully execute one of the most successful federal property transfers we've experienced between the federal government and the local community, and that was, of course, the Lorton property. For nearly a century, the Lorton Federal Prison was an eyesore and a blight and a security threat on one of the most beautiful parcels of land in Fairfax County, 3,000 acres. wasting space and cut off from the public. Following extensive efforts by the Fairfax County government and my predecessor, the Honorable Tom Davis, who chaired our full committee, we were able to facilitate a complex land transfer. And today, the Lorton Prison site has been transformed into Laurel Hill, a dynamic community, fastest growing part of our county, featuring new housing, schools, public parks, a town center, and a premier municipal golf club that hosted the prestigious United States Amateur Public Links Championship last year. It has transformed the southern part of our county. My hope is that with a sustained bipartisan effort by this subcommittee, Mr. Wise will be able to come before us next February to report that the federal real property management has actually been removed from the high-risk list. That would be a great achievement for us, and I believe today's hearing demonstrates a continuing partnership with the chairman to conduct rigorous oversight aimed at finally establishing a national strategy for federal real property management and overhauling the federal real property profile to ensure we're able to credibly measure progress moving forward. I thank again our witnesses for joining us today, and again, Mr. Chairman, I'm proud of our partnership, and I thank you for your leadership in this matter.
Thank you, and I understand your in and out responsibilities. We have small numbers on this subcommittee, huge jurisdiction, but also some very big and successful results, and you cited some of your efforts. And now one of the champions of beating up the offenders of bad management and government, Mr. Meadows, the gentleman from North Carolina. Welcome. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that unique introduction. Really what I'm looking for is at what point do we define success and we finally accomplish it? Because we have had hearings in a bipartisan way. I think both of Republicans and Democrats want us to utilize the assets that we have properly. You know, the numbers that we have, Mr. Mader, I would be interested in hearing from you. You know, are those depreciated values? Are those current market values? If they are current market values, how in the world do we come up with those? I'm a real estate guy, and for me to see billions of dollars worth of assets sitting underutilized is troubling. But it's not just troubling because we have a cost associated with maintaining those properties. So it's not just an asset that's not being used, but it's one that is costing us each and every day. And so I look forward to just hearing from each one of you on how we can hopefully align the responsibility. Our last hearing, I was troubled to find that it's not just the GAO, it's all different agencies managing different parts of the real estate portfolio, and you don't know who's in charge. And honestly, there's not really an incentive for selling a piece of property if your agency is not going to get the money back. You know, I find that, you know, I would hold on to mine if I was going to sell my asset and it was going to go over to some agency. So from a policy standpoint, if there are recommendations that you can make for us to look at in a bipartisan way to address this, I'm all for creating an efficient management, but also know that we won't do that unless there is a financial incentive to do so. And so how we can do that and manage it properly, I'm interested in hearing that. And with that, I will yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you. And again, we'll leave the record open for other members. And we'll go ahead now. Our next order of business will be to introduce our witnesses, then I'll swear them in. First, we have David Mader, and he's the Controller of the Office of Financial Management of the Office of Management and Budget. We have Mr. Michael Gelber, and he's the Deputy Commissioner of Public Building Service of the General Services Administration. We have Mr. David Wise, the Director of the Physical Infrastructure Team at GAO, the Government Accountability Office. And then finally, welcome Mr. James Sullivan, Director of the Office of Enterprise Office Management at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Welcome, sir. And you are again serving us well and the taxpayers by coming and testifying today. This is an investigative panel. We do swear in our witnesses, so if you'd stand, please. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the subcommittee of Congress is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? All of the witnesses answered in the affirmative. So again, welcome. I think I gave you the ground rules. The other thing we'll do is we'll wait till we've heard from everybody, then we'll get into questions, so we don't question each witness individually. So first we'll start with our leader from OMB, Mr. Mader. Welcome. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Micah, Ranking Member Connolly, and Congressman Meadows, for the invitation today to testify on excess and underutilized property listed in the Federal Real Property Profile. This is my first congressional...
I don't think we're getting you full. You need to, yeah, pull that up. Pull that up. Good.
This is my first congressional testimony since being confirmed as OMB's controller by the Senate on July 17th of this year, and I look forward to working with you and the committee members and staff on this very important issue. Each year, the federal government expends taxpayer dollars needlessly on government properties it no longer needs to meet mission requirements. For this reason, the President in 2010 issued a memorandum to the heads of all executive agencies titled Disposing of Unneeded Federal Real Estate, which directed them to take aggressive action to reduce their real estate footprint. Since then, agencies have identified excess and underutilized property and have begun initiating disposal actions. While this is a good start, much work needs to be done. The administration has developed a government-wide strategy to address real property that is laying the groundwork to help agencies achieve a greater reduction and recognize greater savings. Our progress to date represents a significant improvement to the government's real property management capability and the actions that will reduce administrative spending. Our national real estate strategy provides a roadmap to reform real property management, improve the efficiency of the portfolio, and to control administrative costs. The strategy consists of three components. The first, freeze the growth in inventory. Second, to measure performance and identify opportunities to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of data quality. And third, to reduce the overall inventory by reducing actions to consolidate, co-locate, and dispose of real estate assets. The first prong of our strategy is to freeze the federal real property growth. Under our Freeze the Footprint policy, agency performance is measured against their fiscal year 2012 office and warehouse square footage through an annual evaluation, which establish a baseline for us to measure going forward. And the results of each of the agency's performance, and I think you mentioned, Congressman Meadows, that there are multiple agencies that occupy and have responsibility over this, but these agencies will post their results on performance.gov each year. I'm pleased to report that we've significantly overachieved our original plan of freezing the footprint. In fact, as a result of these initial efforts, the federal government reduced its overall office and warehouse space in fiscal 2013 by more than 10 million square feet. Measure is the second prong, and as part of the President's second-term management agenda, the administration developed cost and quality benchmarks for core administrative operations, including real property. We leveraged the existing agency executive councils, in this case the Federal Real Property Council, to develop common standards and benchmarks to measure space utilization, performance, and cost. These benchmarks, coupled with existing government-wide data, are helping agencies to identify opportunities for real property consolidations, space utilization enhancements, and disposal as they are institutionalized within and become standard operating procedure. The third prong represents the ultimate goal of our efforts, and that is to reduce the size of government-wide real property inventory. While over 10 million square foot reduction represents a good down payment, we will continue our work with agencies under Freeze the Footprint policy to identify opportunities for property disposals, as you noted, reduce both the portfolio size and, more importantly, reduce the cost associated with operating and maintaining these assets on a forward-going basis. To make truly transformational progress in reducing the federal portfolio, we need Congress's help. The administration continues to support the Civilian Property Realignment Act as a tool to help improve the management of government's real estate portfolio and accelerate the disposal of excess properties. We continue to believe that the enactment of CIPRA would greatly enhance our ability to deliver results to taxpayers. And to complement our national real property strategy, there are at least two fundamental principles that we want to explore as we right-size the federal footprint. First is the streamlining of processes. New real estate management tools should streamline process requirements to move a project from initiation to completion. Streamlined requirements would enable the government to realize administrative cost savings more quickly and dispose of more properties at a faster pace. Second, investing to reduce costs. Agencies often renew leases in multiple terms in old, cost, and space inefficient buildings because they lack the investment to relocate to better space and smaller space. We believe tools can be crafted that will enable agencies to exchange cost-inefficient space for a much smaller amount of new space as leases expire and realize long-term gains. As we implement the administration's National Real Property Strategy, we look forward to working with you to achieve our mutual interests of a more effective and efficient delivery of government services. Thank you for inviting me to testify today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
We certainly look forward to discussing your proposals. That was music to our ears on what you said. We'll have some more questions about specifics. We'll hear from all the witnesses first. Let's go to Mr. Gelber, and he's the Deputy Commissioner of Public Building Service at GSA. Welcome. You're recognized.
Welcome, sir. Good morning, Chairman Mica, Ranking Member Conley, and Congressman Meadows. My name is Michael Gelber, and I am the Deputy Commissioner of GSA's Public Building Service. GSA's mission is to deliver the best value in real estate to government and the American people. To meet this mission, GSA is pursuing innovative real property proposals that will increase space utilization, reduce costs, and deliver better space to partner federal agencies. Additionally, as part of our efforts to serve our federal partners, we are working with OMB to improve the federal government's inventory system of real property, as well as assisting agencies to dispose of their unneeded assets. GSA is one of more than 24 major landholding agencies in the federal government. Of the more than 870,000 buildings and structures reported by agencies in fiscal year 2013, GSA manages just 9,002. This number accounts for approximately 427 million of the 3.3 billion square feet of space under the government's control, or slightly less than 13%. GSA works to provide space to partner federal agencies at the best possible value. We do that in part by helping agencies to better understand how proper planning, use of shared space, and new workspace arrangements can help them to effectively fulfill their mission while improving our bottom line. For example, Congress provided $70 million in fiscal year 2014 for GSA consolidation projects. Using these funds, GSA is executing 19 projects in 13 states that will save the federal agencies $17 million in rent payments annually and reduce the federal footprint by 507,000 square feet. In fiscal year 2015, the administration is requesting $100 million in support of these worthwhile and cost-effective consolidation efforts. Additionally, GSA is using new tools to leverage the equity of underperforming buildings in our inventory to get new and highly efficient ones. We currently are pursuing several real property exchanges that stand to provide considerable savings to the taxpayer. We are also using tools to redevelop properties that no longer serve the government's needs. With direction from Congress, GSA used its authority under Section 111 of the National Historic Preservation Act, a project Congressman Mike referenced, to outlease the old post office in Washington, D.C. We reached an agreement with a private sector partner to restore this 114-year-old building with $200 million in private sector capital. This significant investment will convert the old post office into a mixed-use development that will serve the local community and preserve the historic facility. GSA also helps the federal government in the management of real property by helping to aggregate data to better understand the federal inventory. In concert with ONB and the Federal Real Property Council, GSA manages the Federal Real Property Profile, or FRPP. The FRPP is a database that provides common information on all of the government's assets. The data in the FRPP is an annual report, so the data is a snapshot taken at the end of each fiscal year. This means it can be a useful tool for inventory, but is not designed to be an asset management system. Each individual agency is responsible for reporting information into the FRPP. Since the database's creation, GSA has worked to improve it by enhancing its technological capability, clarifying terminology, and meeting with agencies to help them better understand the technology and reporting requirements. Additionally, with our government-wide disposal authority, GSA has been working to assist agencies in expeditiously disposing of their unneeded assets. In fiscal year 2013, GSA sold or transferred 213 facilities across the country, generating over $97 million in sales. So far in fiscal year 2014, GSA has sold or transferred an additional 223 facilities across the country, generating close to $30 million in sales. As the Government Accountability Office has noted, there are still a number of long-standing challenges to getting agencies to better utilize their current inventory and dispose of their unneeded assets. Among our challenges, these include the upfront costs of disposals and the competing stakeholder interests that can often slow down the process. The administration is working diligently to overcome these hurdles. GSA is committed to carrying out its mission of delivering the best value in real estate to the government and the American people. We're continuing our work to aggressively manage our own assets while also pursuing innovative new processes to better utilize our inventory. Additionally, we are using our government-wide leverage in partnership with the Office of Management and Budget to better serve our federal partners by improving our data collection practices, assisting them with ideas to better space utilization and disposing of their unneeded assets. These efforts will support the administration's ongoing initiatives to promote efficient federal spending. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. And now we go to the future 11th congressional constituent of Virginia, Mr. Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows. Mr. Conley, I can only aspire to be in the 11th District, but we do make great use of the Lorton Arts Center in Occoquan Park almost every weekend. So we're almost de jure or de facto members. Chairman Micah, Ranking Member Conley, Mr. Meadows, I'm pleased to be here today to discuss federal real property management. The federal government's real property portfolio comprises approximately 900,000 buildings and structures, and it's worth billions of dollars. Federal real property management has been in our high-risk list since 2003 due to unneeded and underutilized facilities, over-reliance on leasing, security challenges, and unreliable data. In 2004, the President established the Federal Real Property Council and required it to work with GSA to establish and maintain a single comprehensive real property database. The FRPC created the Federal Real Property Profile to meet this requirement and began data collection in 2005. My statement today summarizes our recent work on 1. Excess and underutilized property, 2. Structures, 3. Maintenance and repair backlogs, and 4. Cost savings estimates. Federal excess and underutilized property is an ongoing challenge facing the government due, in part, to unreliable data. In June 2012, we reported that the FRPC did not ensure that key data elements were defined and reported consistently and accurately, suggesting that the FRPP is not a useful decision-making tool. Other challenges include the high cost of property disposal and legal requirements prior to disposal, which Mr. Micah referred to earlier. In our report, we recommended that OMB develop a national strategy for managing federal excess and underutilized property. OMB at the time did not directly state whether it agreed or disagreed with our recommendation, but up to now, we had not seen a comprehensive national strategy. We also recommended that GSA and the FRPC take action to improve the FRPP. GSA officials stated that they intend to improve the FRPP and have developed an action plan. We are in the process of evaluating these actions as part of our 2015 high-risk update, which will come out approximately next February. The federal government manages a wide variety of structures which represent over half of the federal government's real property assets, including roads and parking structures, utility systems, monuments, and radio towers. In January 2014, we reported that incorrect and inconsistent data on structures limit the value of the FRPP. We concluded that the agencies we reviewed should improve their data quality in order to document performance and support decision-making. We also found that, even if this data were more accurate, there is low demand for this information, creating few incentives to actually improve the data reliability. We recommended to OMB and GSA that they improve data reliability and assess the feasibility of limiting the data collected on structures submitted to the FRPP. OMB and GSA agreed with the recommendations and will continue to monitor their implementation. Regarding deferred maintenance and repair needs, in a 2014 report, we found that selected civilian agencies followed most leading practices in managing their facility maintenance and repair backlogs, except for transparent reporting about amounts agencies are spending to maintain their assets and manage their backlogs. The agencies reviewed reported FY 2012 deferred maintenance and repair backlog estimates that ranged anywhere from about $1 billion to $20 billion. However, agencies do not share a common definition of deferred maintenance, resulting in dissimilar backlog estimates. Thus, estimates across agencies are really not comparable. We recommended that OMB, in collaboration with the agencies, collect and report information on agencies' costs for annual maintenance and repair and funding spent to manage their existing backlogs. OMB agreed with our recommendation and will also continue to monitor progress on that. Regarding cost savings estimates, in June 2010, the President directed federal agencies to achieve $3 billion in real property cost savings by the end of FY 2012 through a number of methods, including disposal of excess property, energy efficiency improvements, and space consolidation efforts. Agencies reported real property cost savings of about $3.8 billion across these categories. Our report in October 2013 found that space management savings accounted for about 70% of the savings claimed by the agencies we reviewed, and they primarily emanated from activities that were planned or underway at the time the presidential memorandum was issued. We also found that OMB did not require agencies to provide detailed documentation of their reported savings on performance.gov, limiting transparency. OMB guidance was also not clear on the types of savings that could be reported, particularly because the term cost savings itself was not clearly defined. Some agencies did not deduct costs associated with disposals, some did, some reported savings outside the time frame of the memorandum. Accordingly, we recommended that OMB establish clear and specific standards to help ensure reliability and transparency in the reporting of future real property cost savings. OMB generally agreed with the recommendations and will also be evaluating its actions as part of the 2015 high-risk update. Mr. Chairman, sustained progress is needed to address the challenges that make federal real property management high risk. We'll continue to monitor agencies' efforts to implement our recommendations, which we believe are critical to addressing these challenges. This concludes my prepared statement, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from the subcommittee.
Thank you. We'll go next to Mr. Sullivan, who's Director of the Office of Enterprise Management at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Welcome, and you're recognized.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman Mike, Ranking Member Conley. Sorry. Good morning, Chairman Mike, Ranking Member Conley, and Congressman Meadows. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today to discuss the Department of Veterans Affairs management of its real property portfolio. In particular, our ongoing efforts to reduce or eliminate unneeded or vacant property. Today, I would like to highlight the success VA has had in repurposing and disposing of assets, especially where these assets have resulted in housing for returning war veterans and their families. Before I begin, I must emphasize that our primary mission is to provide care for the benefits of veterans. Veterans and our veteran stakeholders view VA's real property assets as theirs, and they have a very strong emotional tie to those assets. VA is the owner of one of the largest healthcare-related real estate portfolios in the nation. VA manages over 174 million square feet, comprising of 151 million owned and 23 million leased. VA has developed a highly structured, data-driven methodology to assess proposed infrastructure projects. The Department's Strategic Capital Investment process, better known as SCIP, involves a systematic evaluation of all proposed capital investments based on how well they address performance gaps, including whether those gaps address disposal of unneeded assets. Through SCIP, we directly address the challenges posed by an aging infrastructure with a range of solutions, including reuse, repurposing, and disposal of assets. VA, through this process, has identified a need of approximately $50 billion in capital investments over the next 10 years to close these critical performance gaps. VA has made significant progress in efforts to reduce vacant and underutilized building footprint and has aggressively pursued reuse and disposal strategies. This has resulted in a 28% reduction in vacant space and a 37% reduction in underutilized space since 2008. So where do we stand today at VA? As of the end of FY 2013, VA has approximately 242 vacant buildings, accounting for approximately 4 million square feet, or approximately 2% of our overall portfolio. VA has plans, which have been submitted to Congress, to dispose or reuse of 131 buildings, or 2.8 million square feet by 2018, leaving a balance of 111 buildings, or 1.4 million square feet vacant. This represents 0.8% of our total square footage vacant at the end of that period. Those remaining structures, most of them are historic in nature, present real challenges as we try to dispose or repurpose those assets. VA continues to pursue disposal, consolidation, and enhanced use lease opportunities to support our mission and operations, shed underutilized assets, and improve efficiency. To date, approximately 5.1 million square feet has been outleased in public-private partnerships through the EUL process. This has in part resulted in 1,700 operational family units or individual units for use for homeless veteran housing. VA's EUL program is an innovative real property asset management tool which VA uses to deal with its vacant and underutilized assets. It allows VA to outlease such assets to private and public sector entities for reuse and repurposing for housing at little or no long-term carrying cost to the federal government. Since the original EU legislation passed in the early 1990s, more than 100 projects have been awarded. An example of where VA has significant success with the EULs has been in Dayton, Ohio at its medical center. VA repurposed 4 vacant buildings at 130,000 square feet for a homeless center, transitional housing for veterans, and child development center. Two additional projects are currently in the developmental phase at Dayton. In December 2011, VA's EUL authority expired. It was later reauthorized, but with a very limited focus only on housing projects. While some EULs can be pursued using this authority, a broader scope is needed to repurpose our assets that are not suitable for supportive housing. VA submitted a request in February 2014 to broaden this legislation to allow for greater repurposing of opportunities. In addition to expanded EO authority, VA welcomes additional tools similar to the proposed CIPRA legislation, which would provide further opportunities for disposal of our most challenging assets. VA would also benefit from legislation that would streamline the disposal process, making it more consistent and easily repeatable. To summarize, VA has a complex real estate portfolio and seeks to maintain the optimal mix of investments needed to care for our nation's veterans. VA welcomes newer expanded tools to address its most challenging assets and, where possible, cut waste and reduce costs to the taxpayer. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning, Mr. Chairman, and happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, and we'll get right into questions. First, I think Mr. Conley and I, as we heard Mr. Mader's testimony from OMB, you've only been there a couple of weeks or months. What is it?
Less than 8 weeks, sir.
Okay, great. But your testimony was music to our ears with some of the things that you've targeted, because we've been trying to move these assets for some time. I had that copy of this report sitting on our assets, the federal government misuse of taxpayer-owned assets, which I was telling Mr. Conley I produced when we were in the minority in 2010, detailing a bunch of examples. One was the old post office. We started back. This is 2014, I checked. So it's taken us 4 years. We didn't want to put this just on the shelf. We wanted to actually have some things happen. But through that process, we've learned that there are impediments. Some of them, oftentimes, we realize. Now, do all of you own property? All of you own property?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You don't own any property, but most of you own property. How many people in the audience own property? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you would give that property to the federal government to manage? Okay, now we see a lot of humor, laughing. Very few people would, because they aren't very good or adept at it. And
Thought I saw Mark Meadows raise his hand in that one.
yeah. he's not going to give it to the federal government. One of the things I tried to do, and with one of the predecessors to Mr. Wise, I guess, or working with her, was it Robine, the former buildings commissioner?
That's on
I'm sorry, Gilbert.
Yes, that would be
Yeah.
Dorothy Robine. She was the
Yeah.
former commissioner of the Public Building
Well,
Service.
she actually cooperated, and we had a hearing and talked about, let's get some people who know how to dispose of assets. There are people who do that in the private sector every day in real estate for big corporations and others. So they actually retain, they put out this RFP for a blanket purchase agreement for real property sales. I got pretty excited about it. She came and testified. The day she testified, she didn't know anything about what they had done, but she had done it, which was kind of interesting. Okay, so I've met with those folks that they selected, that you all selected twice now. And I almost fell off of my chair. They've been selected for some time. I asked them, well, how many properties have you disposed of? It's just a handful. I think $200,000 worth, and the fees were almost as much. And in fact, we held a little round table recently in this room to catch up where they are. We put in place some people who can dispose of property, and very little has been disposed. Are you aware of that, Mr. Gelber?
I'm aware of the contract. It's a new contract for us, and we're looking to use it more frequently.
Yeah, I mean, how about some time? I mean, it's almost a joke. We have people who do this, have done it. Some of them did it in the when we had the savings and loan fiasco. Was RTI, whatever it was, the acronym for it. But they have talent, and they're available. You all have put this out, and they've only done a handful of properties. I think a couple of residences others. So that didn't go as far as we'd like it to go. Then we also learned some constraints, Mr. Mader, and they kept bringing up OMB. Well, some of the things that you announced today that you'd like to do, you've got to streamline the process. It has to be streamlined, because they say it takes so long, the way you score some things. The Cohen building down the street has 1 million square feet. There's been several companies that have proposed coming in, renovating it. We don't have the money for renovation. That's 1 million square feet. It'd be $1 billion probably for us to renovate it. But there's private capital that will do that, and you can amortize that cost. They'll come in, renovate it, lease it back, and then you get ownership after 30 years or whatever you agree on. Is that the kind of deal you think you could do?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to speak for GSA in this particular case, but
I mean, that you're
but what we're-
streamlining the process.
we're looking
And-
for more creative ways
And
to
the other thing
bundle
too,
some of these assets.
The folks that you retain said one of the problems is the way this is scored by OMB, that you want money up front on some of these properties, or the value of that property is all, say, going to a lease from ownership. You want to score that at the beginning. Is that the way you do it now?
I believe so, yes,
Yeah,
Mr.
see,
Chairman.
and that's an impediment to getting it done. There should be some relief, particularly if you can realize that asset is back in the federal domain later on. Now, they've gone around that by doing some leases. Actually, I heard one fairly clever way of, and I'm asking you to help find these ways, not just to be clever, but to be successful. Some of the properties that we do have questions about environmental cleanup, and they've said they've been able to carve some of that out, lease properties, to make the deal happen. Are you in favor of that from an OMB standpoint, sir?
Mr. Chairman, I think from an OMB perspective, I think actually you cited a couple of good examples that GSA has done quite recently, the old
Right.
post office, the power plant in Georgetown, and now the discussion that's underway with regard to the FBI building. I think
We'll just see how well they do with that.
But again, Sometimes OMB is cited as the impediment. I'm hammering them to get rid of the properties. I'm hammering them to find creative ways. They come back and sit with me and say, OMB, the process goes on and on. They won't let you do this. And some of it may require changes in legislation. If you see, sir, or you could provide the committee too, any legislative fixes you may need to tweak. I know we've got the McKinney Act and other things that have been put in historically that also impede the process, well intended, but just don't, you know, they're not practical for this day and age. But if you could come back to us with any legislative impediments you see, the same for you, Mr. Gelber, from GSA, because GSA cites us the same thing. I will give GSA some credit. Since we have been hammering them, they have become a little bit more adept. But sometimes when they even institute their own tools and get the professionals, they've gone out and gotten these folks. And these folks are sitting on their hands. And then I talk to them and they say, well, we have impediments with GSA or finding our way in streamlining the process, because they can get rid of that property. They can get the best deal for the taxpayer. And that's what we're trying to do in this. Veterans Administration,
Yes,
I
sir.
thank you today. I don't know if you knew that they were going to approve my property that's I've been waiting for 2 years on. The timing was excellent. Tell them all back there I appreciate
Thank you.
it. But timing's everything in this business. But I was absolutely stunned to get the list. I mean, you're one smaller agency. They're huge. DOD is mammoth. Post office is mammoth. There are many. But we have 280 some properties worth more than $2 billion. We need to get those on the market, get them utilized, look at whatever we can do with those assets. You've cleared the deck for one in my district, which I'm most grateful for. But again, this week we've got a bill, what, $17 billion. We've got veterans' medical care needs that aren't being met. We got veterans sleeping in parks and on benches, and I've got a list that goes on and on, pages of
Correct.
vacant properties.
Yes, sir. We have repurposed more than 5 million square feet to provide housing for homeless veterans with many of those properties. The lists that you have displayed in the room are some of those that are currently in process. For example, in Iowa, the ones you have listed are a property which we have marketed 3 times for development or for sale, and there are no takers on the property. Many of our properties are not only historic but have little or relative value. The values listed on that chart are what the replacement value would be if we rebuilt that square footage ourselves. It is not the market value. So I mean, we'd be happy to work with your staff and go through each one of those.
Iowa was one example.
Yeah.
I saw a huge number in Massachusetts, New York.
In
a lot
New York
of the
as
Rust
well.
Belt states do have vacant medical facilities or properties that have not been disposed. And again, I think we need to look at everything we can to either put them into performing assets, contracting with folks to utilize the assets.
Yes.
I've got property now that I don't think VA should occupy with VA employees, that there are contractors who can run medical facilities, domiciliary care, and others that we can contract with. And you're going to have additional funds from Congress to act.
Correct.
So you're telling me, Mr. Sullivan, you're going to be doing that.
Yes, we are, and we'd be happy to provide the data on all of those sites. Most of those are all underway in terms of either demolishing the building or going out through our enhanced use lease program. A couple of them are also congressionally directed transfers.
Okay.
They're showing up as inactive because they're in
This
process.
is a big thing too. Now, OMB dragged their feet on giving us the list. We think the list is not totally up to date. It's not complete, and it may be inaccurate in some ways. But the other problem we have, Mr. Bader, with the agencies, every agency is a different breed of cat, and they should have keep an up-to-date list. That should be an OMB budget requirement. One, an up-to-date list. Then there should be some plan for disposal of the properties. I would love to take you, I don't know if Mr. Conley went up, we took some up to agricultural research centers. There are 200 in the United States. We went up to one in Maryland, 7,000 acres, the size of the city of Key West. 600 or 700 buildings, half of them empty. This is some of the most valuable real estate in the United States of America. Now, some of it may be congressional impediments, but that needs to be turned around. But we asked if they had a plan, the Department of Agriculture, to dispose of some of these properties or to turn the asset from non-performing to performing. No. So OMB is missing the boat. You've got to hammer these folks. You can't do everything, but you can get accurate information and data. You can monitor that, you can speed up the process, but also you can require that they have some financial responsibility in a plan to move forward in an appropriate manner to either dispose of these properties or get them utilized, or some game plan. There's a game plan, and I've talked about ag and we've talked about veterans. DOD is mind-boggling in size and scope. So maybe out of this hearing we could get you to also come back and let us know what you're doing in regard to that. Would you like to comment, Mr. Matt?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chairman. First on the issue about definitions, we've worked really hard in the last 2 years in getting, a clarification as to what these terms mean. We think that the accuracy of that database is improving. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. I think the other point with regard to the database, and Mr. Gilbert made this comment, when that was created in 2005, it was created as a very static, once-a-year data collection, and it was really just intended to be an inventory. And what we're looking to do with GSA is to repurpose that so that we can actually use it as a management tool to look at properties in a real-time basis so that we can actually start bundling or looking at ways to better improve the process. With regard to getting agencies' attention, I can tell you that in the last 4 weeks, I, along with the GSA administrator and the Deputy Director for Management at OMB, have visited with about 8 cabinet-level departments, either with the Deputy Secretaries or with very senior officials as part of our overall review of administrative costs. One of the key elements in those discussions is their management of real property. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to assure you and the other members that this has gotten everybody's attention, and people recognize that with shrinking budgets that we really need to dispose of and better utilize what we have, because as you said in your opening comment, every dollar that goes to unused property or underutilized property is a dollar not spent on a mission.
Thank you, and let me yield to our ranking member, Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I echo the Chairman's remarks. Mr. Mader, I think your testimony is very welcome, and I'm glad to hear that we're looking at a more rigorous rubric of trying to get our arms around this. This is not, nuclear physics. This is a manageable, it's a big, but a manageable, problem. Now, we're a microset, but, I was the chairman of Fairfax County. We have thousands of properties with, tens of thousands of acres. We could tell you at any given moment exactly how many pieces of property we own, exactly how many schools, how much square footage under roof, how many acres, whether it's our park system or our public works or whatever it may be. And it seems to me we can't be satisfied until the federal government has an accurate set of metrics that's enforced with every agency. We can't have sort of 2 sets of books. I know you come from the same world I do, the consulting world, and you would never advise a client that it's okay to sort of have, one division have one set of numbers about its assets and the company at large reporting to the corporate board another set. They have to be reconciled and they have to be accurate. So I very much welcome your 3-pronged plan and hope for the best in terms of your success in getting agency cooperation. The chairman also mentioned the RTC after the savings and loan crisis. I remember that very well. The federal government took possession of all kinds of assets. By the way, we actually owned a brothel in Nevada for a little while. Apparently, however, we disposed of it.
Better there than Virginia, right?
Absolutely.
Timing's everything.
Timing's everything. We were at one point, the federal government, because of that, was not the brothel, but owning all these assets of failed S&Ls, we were the largest landowner on the planet. Nobody owned more property than the federal government at that point. And I would not put the RTC model in front of us here. Because essentially what they did was just bundle properties, sort of irrespective of their valuation, and auction them off. And a lot of people were able to take advantage of that and become very wealthy in the process, not the federal government. The ethos seemed to be, let's dispose of it as quickly as we can. I don't want us to do that. I want this process to be a thoughtful process. The other thing I would note is, from my own experience actually doing it, actually taking possession of a federal property. I come back to Fairfax County and Lorton, and Mr. Wise has been there, and I assume you've been there probably too, Mr. Sullivan. Our local government wanted to preserve the land. We didn't want to develop it. That was critical. Now, if we accept a premise that says, no, it's got to be the highest and best use of the land, you're condemning land to commercial development. And that may not fit in with the local plan, comprehensive plan, at all, nor may it be appropriate. Had we gone with that ethos in the Lorton site, which is a little over 3,000 acres total, the southern part of our county would have gone tilt, because we simply could not handle the congestion, the traffic that would have been generated from commercial development. So we wanted to make sure that that was preserved land, open space, passive and recreational space, an arts center, reusing the buildings, the historical buildings. So we finally negotiated that deal with the federal government, and I think it was a win-win. The federal government didn't maximize profit, but 300 buildings, some of them historic, now transferred to the responsibility of the locality, and we were able to preserve 3,000 acres for the community, including a new golf course, which is one of the best municipal golf courses in the country, ballparks, an arts center, and the southern part of the county didn't go tilt. So I hope, as we approach the issue of what do we do with excess property once we know how much we've got, that we do it in a thoughtful manner that takes into account the desires, needs, and plans of the locality in which they are located. Because if the heavy hand of the federal government comes down and just says, no, we're going to maximize our benefit irrespective of your plans, then I think we're going to get a blowback that we deserve. So I hope we will do this, and I commend it to you, Mr. Mayor, as you think about it in OMB guidelines, in a thoughtful way that absolutely includes our local partners. Mr. Wise, in previous hearings, you've told us that there are many government surplus properties that are shockingly listed as being in perfect or near perfect condition in our federal real property database, when in fact they're either abandoned or dilapidated. Can you tell us what accounts for the difference between the building's appearance and the description in that database?
Congressman Conley, the difference really is accounted for. It's not just if something is in good shape, but it said it's in bad shape, or vice versa. This gets back to our 2012 report that I alluded to in the first part of my statement, in which case we found generally that the FRPP data was just kind of all over the map. We found, underutilized properties that were full, and full properties that were underutilized, vice versa. It was just everything and anything you could imagine in 23 of the 26 locations we went to, which led us to the conclusion, after looking at so many different properties, I think it accumulated to be about 180 or 190 different buildings, that there's a problem here. And it may have many sources. I think Mr. Micah and Mr. Meadows also talked about this in their statements, is that you have a lot of different definitions out there. And I think after having done a number of these engagements, the thing that sticks most in my mind is kind of the lack of clear definition and lack of consistency. You take, for example, the Department of Interior the Bureau of Land Reclamation or the National Park Service, they interpret different kinds of property in different ways. They define them differently. They account for them somewhat differently, because many of these agencies at one time were independent, and they were then brought under the roof of the DOI. And the same thing can be true for many other departments. So as a result, and OMB, when we met with OMB staff, have told us, well, they left some of this up to the discretion of the individual agencies because they didn't want to be too prescriptive. And I can understand that, but what's resulted from that is clearly a lack of consistency and clear definition. And that's been kind of the theme that permeates throughout a lot of the real property engagements that we've done over the past several years, at least under my watch.
I think, Mr. Chairman, this is really a very significant point Mr. Wise raises here, because the executive order authorizing GSA to create the FRPP in the previous administration, the Bush administration, Executive Order 13327, said that creating the FRPP was intended to promote the efficient and economical use of America's real property assets. It specifically charged GSA, Mr. Gelber, and I quote, "The administrator of GSA, in consultation with the Federal Real Property Council, shall establish and maintain a single comprehensive and descriptive database of all real property under the custody and control of all executive branch agencies, except when otherwise required for reasons of national security. The administrator shall collect from each executive branch agency such descriptive information, except for classified information, as the administrator considers will best describe the nature, use, and extent of real property holdings of the federal government." Now, here we are 10 years later, and based on Mr. Wise's and GAO's analysis, senior real property officers in many agencies don't rely on the FRPP at all because it's so inaccurate. I mean, not only inaccurate, but as Mr. Wise said, in some cases, actually the opposite of what's asserted is true. With the best of intention in trying to have a unified approach to this subject, the FRPP is not an accurate document, nor one that many people would rely on, frankly, to try to get a picture of what we're dealing with in terms of our holdings and excess property or the utilized property that we want to address. Could you address what GSA is doing about that? Because I think with the best of intentions, 10 years later, on its face, the FRPP has failed.
GSA fully acknowledges that the FRPP needs to improve, and that the definitions of the document, the definitions within the database need to be revised and tightened up so that when various individuals, various agencies are reviewing the database, they're inputting the information from a uniform standard. We're working with the Federal Real Property Council, we're working with the Office of Management and Budget to ensure that that occurs. My sense is agencies now are realizing that this tool is truly a useful tool if used appropriately, and everybody uses it consistently. And through the Federal Real Property Council, GSA is committed to continue to improve the work. We are very thankful for GAO's reports that point out where we also need to improve our performance in this area.
Well, what I just heard you say was certainly noble and but aspirational, frankly. I mean, how are you going to enforce, what tools do you have to enforce accurate reporting so that when a building is described, that in fact is accurate?
Our tool, if you will, is the Federal Real Property Council, which GSA sits on along with the Office of Management and Budget and the other 23 or 24 real estate holding federal agencies, where we come together, develop a shared sense of what a definition should be, and then hold each other in effect accountable for completing the database accurately.
Well, presumably that was the intent with the executive order issued in 2004.
That is correct, and we are working to comply with that order and improve our performance in that area.
Mr. Mader, if OMB is to make enlightened and well-informed decisions, we have a situation where we don't even know what the inventory is. You know, because agencies don't have a uniform way of, as you pointed out, metrics. You know, exactly what are your holdings, exactly where are they located, exactly what is the square footage, and exactly what is the purpose today and in the future. And how would you categorize that property in terms of essential versus all the way to excess we can dispose of. And now, secondly, even describing the condition of those properties, which is codified by the executive order still in place, it's so inaccurate as to be not a useful tool.
Congressman, one of the motivations for my taking this position actually was because of the portfolio, including real property management. I guess there's an old adage of what gets done gets measured, and I think in this particular case, what we need to do, and I think in fairness to GSA, they're an enabler of the OMB policy, and I think OMB needs to take a much more aggressive stance with the landholding agencies. And as I mentioned, you know, in the last couple of weeks, the conversations that have gone on now at very senior levels of departments with regard to how do we better leverage these assets? Because as we all know, budgets are not getting larger. And what I've seen in these meetings is a real commitment to making this program work going forward. And, you know, again, I think it's a partnership between OMB and GSA as well as the Real Property Council.
I just end, well, one thing I might commend to you just as a thought, maybe what we need is a pilot program where we target either a geographic area or a particular agency, and we say, okay, these 100 properties or whatever it is, we're going to try to make sure we've got an accurate database. We have metrics we all agree on, and we're going to have a strategy for what we keep, what we upgrade, what we dispose of, etc. And if it's a model, then it can go, you know, federal wide. But the idea that we're going to encompass 900,000 buildings with tens of millions of square feet and get it all right anytime soon is probably, again, a noble goal, but one that we're going to fail on again. And it seems to me we've got to find a different way of approaching this that's more efficacious. And I commend the thought to you, or there may be another approach, of course, but we have to find a way of getting this. This is a manageable problem, and I know you understand that because you come from the consulting world where everyone's above average. You know. At any rate, my final point would be, Mr. Chairman, sometimes we ourselves up here in Congress can be contributing to the problem. Because I'm sure it's a rare event, but when it's a property in a particular congressional district, we may or may not be cooperative in trying to do the rational thing. Maybe we...
I'm shocked.
I know.
I'm shocked.
No one here, but...
Others before us.
and you know, Mr. Gelber, I think referenced the FBI building. Well, you know, there's a competition right now between Maryland and Virginia, and it will be very interesting to see what GSA decides to do in that adjudication. And there's a lot of political pressure, and of course, we're hopeful that we will resist political pressure and make a rational decision based on the merits. That's the Virginia position, and we're sticking to it. But it puts GSA certainly under a lot of pressure because you've got two state delegations very much aware of the issue and weighing in on it unabashedly. And so sometimes we ourselves have to show some discipline if we're going to help OMB and the various agencies try to get their arms around this problem. Again, Mr. Chairman, I thank you so much for your leadership. I think this is an issue that can definitely bring us together on a bipartisan basis, and I look forward to working with you
And save the
on a
taxpayers
continuous
a lot of
basis.
money.
I'm going to run downstairs to the Ex-Im Bank hearing.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you all for
Conley.
being here.
Mr. Meadows, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank each one of you for your testimony. Mr. Mader, I look forward to your leadership. You're going to get a free pass from me today because anybody who's new deserves some time. I feel like I'm a good judge of character. I believe that you're a man who means what you say, and so the next hearing that we have, and I assume that there will be excess inventory next year, but the next time, I'm hopeful that we don't see guidance and memos and great plans. I hope we see execution, and so we're going to hold you to that standard if that's okay with you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gelber, do you agree with the $6.5 billion figure of excess property that's been bantered around here today? Is that high, low?
That represents the entire federal inventory, so I would not have a way to verify that at this point. I have no reason to doubt that it's incorrect, though.
All right, so your inventory that you manage, Mr. Gelber, is how many billions?
We have around 9,000 buildings, about, I don't have a strict figure for it, I'm thinking about $100 million these are about the 1,000 the 1,000 buildings that GSA owns, excuse me, I'm sorry.
So 1,000 buildings that you own for $100 million.
And again, the valuation of these buildings is always difficult. Replacement value is one number.
So
fair
you're
market
only in
value is-
control of $100 million worth.
Again, that number may not be entirely accurate, but I think it's fair to say that we control 1,000 properties across the country.
All right, but if we have 6.5 billion, you're chump change when it comes to managing inventory.
We represent about 13% of the federal government's real property holdings.
Well, I don't see how those numbers work, because 100 million is not even 13% of 6.5 billion.
Again, the 100 million is just a rough estimate. I'd be happy to provide you a more accurate number. The numbers I am aware of is we control approximately 1,000.
Well, I'm a numbers guy, and so I guess what happens is we start to look at if you have $100 million worth of inventory and you sold $30 million of it this year, according to your testimony in 2014, is that correct?
Yeah, those properties were not.
That's significant. That's 1/3. I don't think that you sold 1/3 of your inventory.
The properties that GSA sells, some of them are owned by GSA, some of them are controlled by other agencies, and we sell on
Okay,
their behalf.
all right. So what you're saying is the $30 million that was in your report is part of the 6.5 billion.
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
So-
That brings me to my next point. Do you classify that as successful?
I think we can always do better at our jobs. I mean, I think we've clearly heard today that there are ways the government can improve.
So yes or no, successful or not?
I think, I'll say yes.
Okay. That's troubling, because at that rate, I did the math, that means that we'll dispose of our excess property in 216 years. 216 years. So I won't be around, you won't be around. So that's successful in your mind.
Well, as I said, sir, we wish to improve in this area. I think across the executive branch, executive agencies are looking at their property.
I know you want to improve, but what's success? I mean, what percentage of that 6.5 billion of excess? We're not even talking about the other. What is successful?
I would have no way to obtain that metric at this point. We respond to
I
the
think
agencies.
therein is the problem. You know, I used to be in real estate. I got paid based on what I sold or what I didn't sell. All right. And so when we have a matrix that we don't know what success is, it's very troubling. Even with Mr. Mader that says, well, we're going to put that up there and it's part of their performance. I've looked at that. They don't get compensated based on how successful they are, not even bonuses. I mean, it's part of their performance review, but there's no linear line in terms of bonuses. We give big bonuses to people that are successful and some that are not, based on what's on the website. So how do we make sure that the compensation matches with performance? I mean, how do we when you come in, if I were coming in, you were coming before me for a performance review, how do I say, Mr. Gilbert, you did an outstanding job, or you did a terrible job? How do we know?
I think the performance in this area should be a joint conversation in the executive branch at the beginning of a fiscal year to ascertain how many of the properties that we currently have declared as excess we should dispose of or resolve in the course of a fiscal year.
I agree. So out of $6.5 billion, what's success?
Again, that would be a conversation amongst the Federal Real Property Council, since the vast majority of those properties are not controlled by GSA.
Okay.
So
All right.
I wouldn't want to impose a success factor on my colleagues and other agencies.
Well, and see, there I think is the problem that we have in Congress is who's in charge? I mean, we've got 4 people. If I were to say who's in charge of excess properties and getting rid of them, which one of you would it be? Okay, all right. So, Mr. Sullivan, we can come to you, and you said earlier that it was historical value for some of those buildings.
Replacement value.
Okay. But that really creates a real problem for you in terms of replacement value, wouldn't you say, in terms of getting rid of a piece of property?
It does. It's a challenge. But we have a plan that shows us trying to get rid of, we have 4.2 million square feet today of vacant square footage out there. Our 4-year plan that we published in our budget is to get that down to 1.5 million by 2018. And I would measure if we hit 80%,
All right.
75 or 80% of that total, given all of numerous tools we could use to do that. Some of that is deconstruction, demolition, or sale, or outleasing, long-term outleasing to other
Right.
entities to take it off our financial liability.
So how do we help you? And I mean this sincerely. How do we help you with regards to the replacement value model that is in place right now? Because if you've got, a huge, we would call it in my business a white elephant. So if you have this huge white elephant of a 2 million square foot building that functionally is obsolete, you're not going to get rid of it at replacement value or anywhere
Correct.
close to it. And so it can sit there and sit there and sit there. So how do we help you where you're not penalized for getting rid of a non-performing asset and OMB doesn't hit you with their negative score or whatever it may be? How do we do that?
I think in our case, if we have our enhanced use legislation that is now restricted to just repurposing for housing, we have a proposal in Congress to expand that to be able to take those assets and receive either cash consideration or other consideration. Enactment of that would help reduce our properties, because at VA, we have very few assets that have a high market
Right.
value. Most
Right.
of these, with their savings to the government, will be not having the recurring dollars to have to maintain those.
Sure.
So if we could just get rid of those properties, either through long-term leases or sales, working with the local community, because we found that's the only way we get these to work, when we can get a synergy of a win-win between the local veterans organizations, the local political structure at the
Right.
local level, and here, when we can align those three things, those out leases go like that, and the financing for them to do it.
So what you're saying is if you leased it for
Outleased it
$1 a year and
for
they
75
covered-
years.
and they covered the maintenance and you didn't get penalized for that, you'd be happy with it.
Yep, and if we could roll in the remediation cost into that deal.
Look at him, Billy. If we could roll that in. He's negotiating. Okay.
Yeah, we roll that into the deal. We've done that at a few places. That's where you can get substantial savings to the government. It won't be a huge cash inflow, but it reduces the cash outflow.
All right. Mr. Mader, I'm going to close with this. I think you see the problem that we have here, and you're one of the few that can help each one of these agencies accomplish what they need to accomplish, and the task is Herculean. But if you can work with these agencies to help them where we don't have 6.5 billion 216 years from now, that's what we need. Let's get a plan. Let's work the plan. And even if it doesn't score well, we'll leave scoring for another day. Even if it doesn't score well from an OMB standpoint, let's let Mr. Sullivan manage his assets and benefit from managing it. Same with Mr. Gelber and Mr. Wise, and let's move this stuff and get it performing. I'm very reluctant. We're about to vote on $5 billion more for Mr. Sullivan to either lease or purchase buildings, and yet we have non-performing assets that are around that he's having to spend millions of dollars every year. So let's see if we can work together. And I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I've got to run to another meeting.
Thank you, and we'll be concluding shortly, but thank you, Mr. Meadows. Just a couple of final questions. First of all, for GSA, well, let me just ask this question. Have you, Mr. Gelber, have you met with these folks yet?
Members of the GSA staff have. I have not
But you
personally.
haven't.
I have not personally.
Okay. I need your pledge in the next 30 days to meet with these people. Sit down and just talk to them. You compiled a great set of experience who are capable of disposing properties, but you should sit down with them. This is from May 2013, and hear them out. If you haven't met with them, I will call you back either voluntarily or subpoena you, and we'll come back to this room and meet with them. Okay. I'm trying to work with the agencies, give you the tools. You have the tools. The tools have not been used. And I heard some of the impediments, and some they referred to OMB. We've had the gentleman from OMB as a breath of fresh air, at least in his testimony. And Mr. Meadows says we'll hold his feet to the fire, which we will too. But you've got to have the ability to operate, and we want to hear if there is a problem. And you should also be meeting with OMB on these issues. So that's the first thing I need out of you. The second thing, the Dyer Courthouse. I've done 2 hearings down there. I did have a representative of the college. You know the story of that?
I'm familiar with it, sir.
The Dyer Courthouse, empty for 5-6 years, gathering mold. After I did the first hearing in Miami at the empty courthouse, I got a letter from Dr. Padron, the president of the college, who is across the street, as close as the next office building, not as far as the Capitol, but right across the street, saying we've been trying to get the property for 4 or 5 years and couldn't get a response from GSA. That, understand those negotiations are ongoing. We want that property, any of the issues are resolved as soon as possible. The college can use it. It costs us over $1 million to maintain it, and there's millions of dollars now in mold remediation that's required by keeping it empty. All of these buildings require security, they require maintenance, they require a whole host of things that cost the taxpayers. I think the empty power thing was over $1 million a year. So again, empty facilities may be empty, but they have a huge cost to taxpayers, not mentioning what we can do putting them in the positive column. Okay, then I also want an update. My staff hands me these notes. We did a hearing in an empty warehouse and property not just blocks from here. I'd like an update on the status of that. The whole community turned out. It was a huge turnout for a proposal to use that property, still sitting vacant to my knowledge. And then the Cotton Exchange, if you could also give me an update on that. One of the largest properties in the District of Columbia. You have say over it, and I understand there is a plan, but that needs to go forward. So that project alone is will be in excess of $1 billion. But you got an empty Cotton Exchange building on a huge piece of property that goes from, I think, Independence all the way to the Expressway and then beyond. You want to answer for the record that you're going to respond on these?
Yes, I'd be happy to do so, sir.
Okay. One of the things we're going to have to do is, again, we've got sort of garbage in, garbage out, is get the lists up to date from agencies. But more than having a list up to date, I go back to Mr. Mader, a plan. It's impossible, and Mr. Conley had spoken that maybe we could pick 100 properties, but I think we've got to do it agency by agency. They have to have a plan of first of an inventory, then a plan of action on disposal, and then by your helping to speed up the process or finding solutions. And we are part of the impediment. We have the McKinney Act. I found on the Maryland property agricultural research center that there had been a caveat put in the law on the use of the land. But we've got to find ways to either go back, change the law, change the process, and any recommendations that you have, you're just getting into this, but we need them as soon as possible. The legislative remedies do take time. Mr. Denham and I have introduced measures. Others have introduced measures. It's very hard to get those through Congress. But we also can be very creative in working. And I do, while I'm critical of GSA, I also compliment the latest efforts. And I met with a new public buildings administrator. It looks like they're trying to find creative ways to dispose of property or utilize them. Thank you, Mr. Wise, for, again, your assessment and evaluation. You see the difficulty that we have, and any other recommendations that you have from the GAO to us, we'd appreciate, but thank you for your work.
Well, thank you, sir. One thing I might like to add is one of the things we've seen that I think could be helpful to agencies, especially out in the field, is we've seen that with the FRPP, even though it is, as we've all recognized, rather a flawed database, some parts of it are better than others. The the location of a property and who it belongs to is generally pretty good. And one of the things we found in some of our field work was that you might show up in a medium-sized city somewhere, and there may be some empty space in a field office of one of the federal agencies, and the guy down the street from another federal agency doesn't know it because he doesn't have access only to his own data. And so one of the things we've talked about, and I think I've dealt with Dave's predecessor, and we've talked some about this, is that FRPP becomes more of an open source document within the confines of the federal agencies, so that one can know what the other has and then make some decisions as to, well, hey, maybe we could get rid of one lease and combine two leases into one lease and move the small field office of SHWA into vacant space in the postal building in that town. So those are the kind of things that are not particularly complicated fixes to come up with, but could actually, if you know, as the military would say, kind of a force multiplier. If you look at them on a countrywide basis, could actually provide some substantial efficiencies and potential cost savings. So I think a more open FRPP might be a useful help to the federal agencies as well as to us. We've also had trouble getting access to the FRPP, but
Well, again, I appreciate your recommendations, and heaven forbid we should have agencies utilizing space. Now, I have, in my own backyard in Florida, I have 144,000 acres. It's 6 times the size of Manhattan. It's owned by NASA. Their mission has changed in 5 years. 600 buildings, half of them vacant. Launch pads, other buildings that can be used. We took the committee down there. We've done a hearing. They are on a path. We had our port, which is adjacent to that, testify. Give us 200 acres out of 144,000, and then a rail line that goes across not only their property, but the Air Force next to the 144,000 has the landing strip, 16,000 acres, a beautiful rail line going through, little connection from the two properties to the port. 5,000 jobs could be created by making that a port container full operation. So we've got assets that can be valuable, not to mention possible return for the federal government, the Air Force, NASA, jobs. We're getting some of those properties now turned around, relocating businesses, and even for Nature Conservancy, we had some of those folks in, preserving some of it. It all doesn't have to be developed to the hilt, but unlimited possibilities with a little bit of creativity. I know you have limited GSA authority over that. This committee does not, and when I chaired transportation, we focused mainly with you. But the rest is, like you said, what, 13%, 11% of all the properties?
13% for GSA.
So again, the realm is huge. I've sat with DOD and Post Office, and my mind just spins from the amount of property that they have that we could better utilize and dispose. So, but great ideas, and looking at cross-pollination of agencies utilizing space would be remarkable. Thank you finally to Mr. Sullivan for appearing. We look forward to working with you. Any impediments you see to the 280 buildings that are identified in the list that I brought here. Some properties are rough, some economies are rough, and it's hard to dispose of them. But it also costs the taxpayers to keep them on the roll, so we've got to balance that and try to see what we can do to best utilize them. And so we look forward to working with you, and also thank them for the action on that one. That'll make a big difference in Central Florida. We're a growth area, and we have more veterans coming, and after the cold winter we'll have even more, and the improvement of the economy coming to Central Florida. That's one of the issues we face with our veterans. We have lots of assets in the north, and those people are now in the south. They're in Phoenix, where we had the huge problem of BACA. They're in Texas, they're in Florida, some of the warmer states, and the populations are changing. So that's important that we move those assets around, and if we have encumbrances or restrictions by law or anything you see, we want you to let us know.
Absolutely, we will, sir. And just to let you know, the same tool of the contractors that are on the GSA tool you raised earlier in the hearing is some of the same ones that we use for our long-term leasing. So we're tapping into that expertise through a different vehicle to help us with our long-term out leasing of property. And they're
Well, there are multiple hearings being conducted at this point. We've heard from several members of the subcommittee this morning. Without objection, we're going to leave the record open for 10 days. We may have additional questions that we'll submit to you, and those responses will be incorporated into the proceedings